Okay, hello YouTube. Today we're going to be discussing more about the Fischer Sozin Sicilian in my ongoing series on the Open Sicilian. And if you like content like this and you want to see more of it, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button and click on your notification icon. So today's video is going to be about the Scheveningen pawn structures within the Fischer Sozin Sicilian. It's going to happen after e4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4, c takes d4, knight d4, knight f6, knight c3, a6, and then we're going to play our Fischer Sozin variation with the move bishop to c4. And now we're going to see e6. So another move order that this can come from, and I'm going to try to cover these both kind of at the same time, is this can also happen from kind of a classical move order. And this is kind of what we're going to be discussing here. Is after e6, bishop b3, we're going to be talking about the move knight c6, which transposes to a classical variation via the Najdorf move order, but also we're just going to discuss doing this kind of on the spot instead of the a6 variation. This could also come after, say, knight c6, bishop c4, and then e6, and this could also happen after the move e6 and then bishop c4. So I'm going to try to kind of cover these all together in one video so that you don't have to see each of these. So all we're going to really do is just discuss a couple of the exceptions, like what happens if they don't play a6 and they decide to do something else. Well, against the straight Scheveningen pawn structure, there really is only one independent line, and it kind of goes e6, bishop, bishop c, e6, bishop c4, bishop e7, bishop b3. And then they could say castle, and then you could play bishop e3, and what you're preparing to do here is you're preparing to play the line that I personally choose to play against the classical variation. So if they continue with knight c6 and a6 in this position, we're going to continue with what's known as the Velimirovic attack. We're going to play queen to e2, we're going to castle queenside, and we're going to play rook hg1, g4, g5, and we're going to proceed with that particular variation. So there is one independent line here because they haven't played the move pawn to a6 yet. They do have the option available to them to play the move knight to a6. And this has some independent value, and there's two ways basically you can meet this. Way number one is you can go ahead and play pawn to f4 is an option, and then after knight c5 you can shuffle your queen in behind with queen f3, and after a5, there's some merit to going ahead and castling queenside. And there is one game here, Astraniu versus Adrenaliu in Bucharest in 1994. They continued with a4, bishop c4, a3, b3, and then these exchanges took place with d5 getting played, bishop d5, and then white ended up being okay here, but the position is probably approximately level, although white did go on to win in that particular game. So it is reasonable to play chess this way. F4 isn't my recommendation, just because I, generally speaking, don't like these positions where white chooses to castle queenside. I'd prefer to just castle kingside, but apparently the nature of this particular position, it almost kind of dictates that you castle queenside here. So after knight a6, I kind of prefer this slightly less tested line. I think f3 is really the way to go. And after knight c5, we're going to play queen d2, and we're just going to play this like an English attack. And the games that I've seen here for white have been really, really straightforward, and it just looks like the way I would kind of play chess. So it's a6, g4. The game we're following here is Munich versus Van der Weide in Amsterdam in 1971. It was played a very long time ago, but the ratings for these two guys are really high, so it's a high-quality game. We had just basically white didn't castle right away, and he just rushed his pawns on the king side. He got a big king side attack, and he was able to make that score the full point. He just kept pressing on the king side. He eventually just castled queenside just to bring his last piece kind of into the attack. And that was more than enough to finish the game, bringing his knight back to b3, just preparing to bring his last piece into the attack, and he's just completely winning here, up material, and still attacking the black king. So that's kind of my recommendation against knight a6, is just go ahead and play f3, play queen d2, and just, play like this English attack setup, play g4, h4, h5, g5, etc. So that's what I honestly think you should do against this independent line. And it is really one of the only independent lines here. Everything else is going to lead to a Velimirovic attack. So we have to discuss other independent lines inside of this a6 variation. So a6, we have bishop c4, we have e6, bishop b3, and then this is a big move. It's interesting because this move within the Strenigan pawn structure, I would say this move, in my experience, it most often gets played by people that don't know the theory, because the theory for the opening is really either knight on b to d7 or b5 they've always been widely considered the two main lines. So people that play bishop e7, generally speaking, don't know the theory, but at the same time, on a practical level, it's actually a very difficult move to meet. You're not really quite sure how black is going to evolve his position from here. You don't know if he's going to play b5. You don't know if he's going to switch gears and play knight d7 or knight c6 later. It's actually a little confusing trying to figure out exactly which plan you should take here. So there's a couple different options that are available. You can immediately go for f4. This is actually really, it's a really reasonable idea. It's the way Fischer approached it when he was faced with this opening, and I think it's probably the best way to go, is to probably play f4 and f5 just immediately and just go after the e6 square. After queen c7, you should just play f5, and I had a game go e takes f5, and now the correct way to play this, according to Sokolov, who played this, and I think it is the better move, is knight takes f5. I actually had a personal game that went e takes f5, which is apparently also playable, and this game ended up going pretty good for me. I ended up sacking that pawn on f5. I castled kingside. And apparently after all of these exchanges, this is just advantage white. It's actually probably already close to major advantage white, just the way that the exchanges went down. After knight g5, I just had a nice, comfortable advantage, and my opponent felt obligated to give me an exchange, which I took. But it's not clear if he had a better move. His center's kind of starting to fall apart. I'm threatening to come in anyway. So this is maybe how we play this against people that play bishop e7, is we just play this immediate f4, f5. Sokolov prefers the move knight takes f5, which is probably stronger. And he had a very short game against Adams in Bern in 1993 that went bishop takes f5, ef5, knight, bishop e3, and then we had bishop d5, castles kingside. So similar strategy, just kind of occupying the d5 square, castling kingside. He didn't lose a pawn though, so this is better than my idea. And then after bishop d4, the position was lost for black. It's hard to see at first kind of why the position is lost, but just take a look at this knight. This knight is actually trapped, so black actually managed to trap his own knight in this position, and that's why black is resigning here. But basically, white just had really good pieces for most of the game. Queen d7 is, of course, a blunder, losing this knight, but just in general, white had really good piece placement here, and the computer thinks white's doing better. So another option, if you don't want to do that, if you still want to keep your options open to play your Velimirovic, there's a couple other options. You can play g4 to try to play the Velimirovic. And you do have to be prepared for this early d5, though. So this was actually played between Latier and Van Wheely in Monte Carlo. And this actually ended up going okay for white. So that game went e takes d5, knight takes d5, knight d5, e d5, and then knight f5. And this position is supposed to be reasonable. After bishop f5, gf5, d4, rook g1, he just put some pressure on the g file. And even though I don't totally trust this position, I can't deny the result, and I can't deny that the computer seems to think this is okay for white. So white has a lot of open files and a lot of play here. The game went castles, queen g4, and it actually ended really quickly. White just whipped up a really powerful kingside attack, and after a few more moves, that was pretty much a wrap. H5, he sacked his queen. It was a pretty queen sack. He's got rook h4, followed by mate on h8. With a very nice finish. So g4 is certainly a way to go to try to just keep playing your Velimirovic. you can certainly play g4, and it doesn't seem like attempting to refute it with d5 is something you need to be worried about. So it kind of seems like you're just going to end up transposing into some type of Velimirovic, where you've thrusted g4. So, h6, bishop e3, knight c6, and then we're just going to play something like rook g1, and we're going to be right back in our Velimirovic where they've inserted h6, which in the Velimirovic usually isn't a favorable thing to insert, because when white does eventually continue with his h4 g5 plan, when he plays g6, it's going to cause a lot of harm now, because there is no pawn on h7 to capture it. And that's actually kind of a big deal. So this would be a favorable version of the Velimirovic. And yet a third way that you can approach this, if for some reason you're worried about the g4, d5 lines, even though right now it seems like those lines are good for white, a third way that you could approach it is you could just doggedly continue with bishop e3. Now, quite a few people will not transpose with knight c6 here. A lot of people will try to take advantage of this loose pawn. You can actually just sacrifice this pawn. Either on this move or the next move, it doesn't seem to matter. And after b4 here and then knight takes e4, you can just plug this knight into the b6 square. And the whole point is that you're getting all of your material back with all of this stuff that's hanging in the position. And apparently these positions are supposed to be slight edge white. Again, according to the computer, these are supposed to be slight edge white. So if they go after the pawn, you're supposed to be okay here. It's probably better for them just to kind of maybe not take this pawn, but still it looks like white is coming out okay in the complications. So you could just play it like this as well. You could play bishop e3, queen e2, and again, it seems to come out ahead no matter kind of what order they pick. Like they could play queen c7, castles queenside, and then they could play b4, and this still seems like a favorable. Actually, this situation is maybe even more favorable because they've wasted this tempo. They will be able to move their queen to a5 and potentially put some pressure on your now castled king, but the fact that your rook is in the game is the net is a net positive tempo for white. So you can do this and you can play the Velimirovic that way. So you've got really, against this move, bishop e7, you've got three really solid options that you need to pick from, and you can just pick whichever one makes you feel more comfortable. You can play this immediate f4, f5, which more than likely is, I would say more than likely this is the best continuation. But g4 right now, until somebody shows me a problem in these d5 lines, g4 seems like it's just an improved Velimirovic attack. And if you just don't trust the positions after g4, d5, you can just go straight into your mainline Velimirovic after bishop to e3. So the only other kind of independent lines that you need to worry about are, positions where after you play bishop c4, they do something goofy. So like they could play something like knight c6, and generally speaking, this is considered a mistake because of knight c6, bc6, and then e5. So this is a well-known concept. Basically, the idea is that they cannot capture with this pawn, because if they do, you're going to play bishop f7 and win their queen. So if takes, we have bishop f7, king f7, and we win a whole queen. So it's a cool little trap. So they're going to have to move their knight. And then this is kind of their role is if they can't support their knight with a move like f5. So this is how I remember this trap, because there's this trap and then there's the one with g6 that look very similar. If they can't support their knight with f5, then we are good to go to play pawn to e6 and get an advantage this way. So in this position, we should just play something like pawn e6. They can play knight here. We would just simply take everything, and we can take everything, and we can play queen f3, and this is going to be advantage white. Now, if they go about this from a different move order, meaning we get to this out of the classical move order, for example, and then we play bishop to c4, and then they play g6 and try to turn this into a dragon with g6, then we use the same trick, but e6 is kind of a lemon now, because they do have pawn to f5, which holds the knight, and it just really holds everything together. It's actually very difficult to play this position from here. So e6 is a lemon. What we're supposed to do is we're actually supposed to play bishop to f4 and just hold this pawn. And this is actually just supposed to be advantage. This is actually just supposed to be advantage white. What's amazing is after d5, theory holds that we're really just supposed to take. We're just supposed to take here, and then after c takes d5, we're really just supposed to continue with queen takes d5, of all things. Because even though we're exchanging queens in this position, which we're actually forcing because we're attacking all kinds of stuff, there's this big, long calculation that leads to us getting our material back. And that big, long continuation is queen takes d5, bishop d5, and then rook b8, and then we're going to play bishop c6 check. And they don't have a good move here. They kind of have to play bishop d7. If they were to play king d8, they're walking into other problems. So bishop d7 takes, and then e6, and we're checking the king, and we're getting back our rook on the b8 square. So this big, long continuation actually leads to advantage white. So that's what we're doing against these two ideas. So the only thing that's going to be independent of a Velimirovic, other than these two ideas, is something like this queen b6 move. And that's going to be independent within the classical variation, where they play queen b6 and they get this knight to move. Now, I've personally experimented with a number of moves here. I've experimented with knight on d to b5, which is actually, again, trying to get that Velimirovic formation. Modern theory doesn't like this move as much as it used to. It used to really like it. Now it hates it. The other two options are to retreat to e2 or to retreat to b3. And I've had probably the most success with just simply retreating to b3 because the plans here seem incredibly simple. So after, say, bishop e3, and then, say, queen c7, we just retreat this bishop back to b3, and then we continue with kind of what they call a third-rank attack. We play f4, we play queen f3, and then we play g4, and we play g5, etc. I was actually successful in beating John Elvis in a rated blitz game in this, one of my grandmaster wins with white. I played this variation, and some grandmasters don't like to play this variation with white because I think there's another position that they can play where you have an extra tempo. But it's actually okay to be down this tempo just because the position is just still very aggressive for white. You haven't really lost a tempo. I mean, you retreated your knight, but they also moved their queen out and they retreated their queen. So there is some other position in theory that you can get to something like this where white has an extra move, but this position, both positions are considered slight advantage white, so this is very reasonable to play. And the plan is very simple to follow. Just f4, queen f3, g4, g5. You can castle queenside. And you can just rush him on the king side, h4, h5, g6. It's the exact type of thing that you want to be playing against a higher rated player. Just because, you're not going to get lost on the plan. At that point, it's just a game of tactics. And, you have every chance to win. But I also would recommend this. I would just recommend this plan against anybody. So that's basically all of the alternatives to the Velimirovic, which within the Scheveningen pawn structure. And in the next video, we're going to be discussing. We're going to do a deep dive specifically into the Velimirovic, which is going to be your main line, and that's going to the Velimirovic is a very, very complicated animal. So the mainline Velimirovic is going to start with e6, bishop b3, and then we're going to have a6, and then we're going to have bishop to e3 and bishop e7. And this is going to kind of start our mainline Velimirovic, where white continues with queen e2, queen c7, castles queenside, and this position is just going to lead to a ton of complications, and it's definitely going to constitute its own video, possibly more than one. So anyways, I hope you found this video helpful, and I hope you learned something new about chess. Thank you very much for watching.